DJ LeRoy, how are you?
NightWatchman, man. It seems like it's been a while, but a lot has happened in, let's say, less than a week. Can you say the dissolving of a government in Afghanistan? Like, wow,
I blame
incredible.
you.
Oh, why me? Well, are we supposed to stay there forever and ever? Just let me know. Tell me.
We need a scapegoat, and we're trying to. You're taking some flack for our president. So, although truth be told, we know the blame lies on the previous president who cut the deal. So,
God, that is true. That is,
right.
he cut the deal with the Taliban, minus the Afghan government that we were funding.
Right.
Go figure. You can't make this stuff up. So you know what? We definitely want to kind of like know what's happening in terms of, let's say, tourism. Did you know this is a $55 billion industry?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that big. But have you wondered, NightWatchman, in terms of, let's say, the lockdown and COVID, what's been happening?
Absolutely.
Oh, you did not sound convincing on that. You know that.
Okay. You caught me off guard.
Well, you know what? Why don't we bring a number of actual tour guides, those who are on the front lines doing this stuff, out for the show? What do you say?
Okay.
You want to introduce or what?
No, you should do the introduction.
Oh, okay. So you know what? This is a woman I've known for many years, literally in, as they say, the village of Harlem, and that is the one, the only, the owner and president of Welcome to Harlem, Miss Carolyn Johnson. Bring out Carolyn. All right, there you go.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hey.
Welcome to Harlem.
So next, from across, literally across the pond, man, we're talking about in Amsterdam, where you also have a Harlem with 2 A's, by the way. That is the one day on Black Heritage Tours, Miss Jennifer Tosch. Hey.
Hello, everybody from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, because when I say Amsterdam, when I'm in New York, people assume I'm talking about Amsterdam, New York.
Welcome, Jennifer.
Nice to be here.
And last but not least, this is guy. You know how sometimes they say you got reformed bankers, okay? Reformed banker who's now literally a tour guide and actually started a unique tour, and I'm talking about the jazz enclaves, haunts, and houses of those greats in southeastern Queens, and that is none other than 360 Tours, Mr. John White. How you doing, John?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. So everyone, we certainly do know whatnot. And Carolyn, I want you to get right in there because I used to see you on the boulevard in Harlem with groups, thousands of folks, conducting your tours. Since the lockdown, what has been the experience? Do tell.
It has been extremely hard as a tour operator since the lockdown. You have to remember a large proportion of our clients come from Europe and other places when they come to Harlem to do tours. And the fact that we don't have that stream of individuals coming into the city anymore, tourism has literally dropped off by like 90%. And the people that we have been getting have been locals, which we're very grateful for. But overall, as a tour operator, it's a struggle. It will continue to be a struggle, and I don't see any end anytime soon for us. I predict that we're really not going to come back until 2022, 23, with the way this variant is going around and stuff like that, until Europe and other places open up and they start mixing and mingling once again inside of the United States. And it has also affected our jazz piece, which is Harlem Jazz Box, that we were doing the live jazz concerts Tuesday afternoons and Friday evenings with Craig Harris being the curator. We were able to, thank God, to bring that back up on Fridays, but that's also a struggle. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out going into the future. I can't hear
on
you.
mute.
You're on mute, Curtis.
See, that's, I guess, another one of the things that one has to get used to, this reality. And so
right.
The view from here again, once again, 360 Tours. Do tell, John, what's going on?
Well, I mean, basically, I would echo everything that Carolyn said. Queens 360 Tours is a relatively new venture, and I got into this business and have been working with a firm called New York Tour One, kind of / the Wall Street experience for several years. And when the pandemic hit, basically, boom, I mean, it just fell off a cliff. Everything fell off a cliff. Nobody was coming, locals, especially folks from overseas, and New York Tour One gets a ton of folks from overseas as well. Groups from, all over the world, school groups, military groups, crazy sets of people coming in. But it just died on the vine. What's next? It's started to come back this summer. It began to come back a little bit, started with some of the local stuff, some of the promotions that New York City and Company has done, helped with some of the local tourism promotion, tourism volume. But the bulk of people from other places, other states and other countries just still hasn't shown up. And nobody really sees that coming up, particularly in light, once again, as Kim said, the Delta variants and all that kind of stuff. We really don't know, and of course that's hit my stuff in Queens as well. Nobody wants to do anything anyway, anywhere. So it's going to be a minute before it all comes back. I mean, I was texting, as a matter of fact, just the other day with some folks from Belgium, who I'm close to, who come every year. These people work for the university in Belgium, and they canceled obviously last year. They canceled for this year as well, right? They hope to come next spring, but that's the mentality. And so that translates on the ground to nobody on the boulevard, if you know what I'm saying.
Gotcha. Absolutely. And of course, from across the pond in the Netherlands, the experience. Do tell. And welcome, Neal. Okay.
Hey, how you doing, Curtis?
Good. Harlem Heritage Tours. Neal would basically talking to everyone in terms of, let's say, the experience, what you've had to do during the lockdown to really deal with the pandemic. So now we're up with Jennifer Tosch. Jennifer, do tell.
Well, yes, thanks for having me on the program. So everything that Jonathan and Carolyn have said, times the dynamics of being also internationally. So I have a tour here in Amsterdam, the Black Heritage Tours in Amsterdam, along with the Black Heritage Tours New York State. So when the pandemic hit, I was actually on a tour in Amsterdam. Everything shut down instantly. The country shut down, all the travel restrictions. And we've only been able to have short periods of time because a new variant raises its head, and we go back to starting from square one. So it has been devastating for our business. All the tours that were scheduled, because 85% of the tours here in Amsterdam are international visitors from all over the world. So that immediately got canceled. And, this year we hoped that things would have improved much more. And we're back in another sort of partial restrictions in place. So we haven't recovered and haven't been able to do any tours in New York State since the pandemic. So it's been a very difficult and challenging time. And we're just trying to stay with our neck above the water till this the world recovers. And hopefully, as Carolyn said, next year, we're already planning into 2023, hoping that this will be behind us at least.
Mute.
God help me. God help me.
Put a quarter in the jar. Put a quarter in the jar.
You know it. I got you. So, Neal, do tell, because, you are also one of the people that I would often see with groups traversing the community, showing people the sights, the sounds, the smells, the environment that is Harlem. Do tell how you've had to pivot during COVID, and what have you noticed?
I mean, you could just imagine before COVID, the projections were high. Everybody was expecting to break all kinds of records in terms of visitorship to the community, whether it be domestic or whether it be national travel. right before I was working with Adidas, right before I had groups coming in from all over the city, from around the country, around the world. And then that third week of March, boom, everything came to a screeching halt. And if you could imagine getting the information from various newscasts that it was going to take, some say, 10 years for the industry to recover. Curtis, can you imagine how scary that information was? After you put 20 years of your life into a business and you think that it's going to take that long to recover. So at any rate, immediately we had to pivot. Immediately we had to go virtual. I'm just so thankful to community organizations that were understanding, like my landlords, Mass Jim Malcolm Shabazz and the Malcolm Shabazz Development Corporation. I'm so thankful for organizations like Harlem Parade, who came in Harlem, and they made their business the business of supporting struggling businesses. So it just became a situation where you try to apply for PPP and all kinds of federal aid. And what I did, in addition, was start sell Harlem merchandise. Came up with a T-shirt line and a sweatshirt line, and I have this business from which I can sell merchandise. And so it just became the matter of just trying to find other ways, alternative ways to generate income for oneself. But again, I'm just so thankful for the community organizations that helped out during that most difficult time.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know what? Basically, what I want to also find out, because as I referenced earlier, let's say, John, you're a former banker, who got into tourism. So I definitely want to understand from each of you your journey into the tourism space. Carolyn, do tell.
Say that again.
I want to understand your journey into the tourism space. What got you into tourism?
Well, we can thank Valerie Jo Bradley for that. She's a great friend and my mentor. She had gotten a grant, I think, in 2003, 2004, to teach people how to be tour guides. And she was teaching the class up there on City College. And she had called me the first day of the class, and she was short a couple of students. So she asked me to round up some neighbors, and we go and sign up for the class. And I wound up taking the whole series of classes and stuff like that, and really enjoying that whole experience of really getting into the weeds about the history of Harlem and how to be a tour guide. And from there, I set up Welcome to Harlem, and we've been walking the streets of Harlem ever since. It's been a really wonderful experience, because this was like one of the last things on my mind to do. Being born and bred in Harlem, I already had the love for my community, but to be a tour guide just wasn't something I was thinking about to help promote and show what a beautiful community Harlem is, and how fascinating the history is of the community. And unfortunately, we still have that negative image to the outside world. And when people come here and they see how beautiful the neighborhood is, how nice the people are, they leave with a different perspective, which is really nice.
Nice, very nice. And Jennifer, from across the pond there in the Netherlands, you are from the U.S. So
I'm born. Yes, absolutely. I was born in New York. Born in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were immigrants from the Dutch Caribbean, from Aruba. They were actually originally from Suriname, South America, which was a former Dutch colony in the 17th century. And they immigrated to New York in the 60s, like many people from the West Indies and from around the world. And so I basically grew up, though, in California. And when I came to live here in the Netherlands in 2012, I was studying abroad. I went back to school after the financial crash there in 2008 in the US. And I actually have a financial background. I was working for Visa and Charles Schwab in global marketing partnerships for 20 years before transversing into becoming an academic. So when I got here to the Netherlands and I was studying Dutch colonial history, my family's been in this country for 3 generations. I was really just kind of taken back, because most of the discourse was so focused on this idea of the glory of the Dutch golden era that they love to celebrate, highlighting the 17th century and its successes and conquests, but was not talking at all about Black history or about history of the migrations, forced and voluntary. So it was a real gap in that narrative. I kept, unlike maybe many of my colleagues here did not intend in becoming a tour guide or owning a tour company. It was a project. I started doing extensive research, and it evolved into what became Black Heritage Tours in 2013. And then because I'm from New York and I learned so much about the Dutch colonizing New York before the British, because most people know, of course, about New York as a British colony, but very few knew about it as a Dutch colony in the 17th century. So after a lot of research and collaborations, I co-wrote 3 books on the topic about Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and of course, Dutch New York history. So that's what launched the idea of doing tours, more so not just focusing on one of the boroughs, but the whole state, because upstate New York was where the Dutch first built the first fort, and what's now Albany, the capital. And so we travel along the Hudson River Valley into New York City and do a kind of more of a multi-day experience, because there's so much history there in New York that connects to the Netherlands and to, of course, South America. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. And looking forward.
Got you.
A lot of
John,
people didn't know that Sojourner Truth was enslaved in New York and only spoke Dutch until the age of 10.
That's right. And she, of course, is a part of that story. We go to Eusopus, where her statue is located there as part of the journey. You're absolutely right.
Hold it, back up. So you mean that there was slavery in the North?
Oh, yeah.
I thought it was only in the South.
Wall Street, Button Tree.
All of it. I mean, there's so many, and of course, Harlem is named after the Harlem here, as you already said, Curtis, with 2 A's. Brooklyn is a city not far from where I live. Wow. Staten Island was purchased by the Dutch. Beverwijk, Wildwijk. I mean, all the cities that now have kind of been transformed into this sort of British nomenclature originated with the Dutch and the Portuguese even before then. So there's a long...
And Curtis, you also have to remember there's the African burial ground on 121st Street and First Avenue.
That's true.
Well, we also go to an African burial ground. Most people don't even know about. That's in upstate New York, and that's in... oh my God, all of a sudden I'm drawing a blank, but that's has a marked grave that's been pretty much untouched that says born in Africa. And so we go to places that most people have no idea even existed. New Yorkers were the first people that we introduced the tours to, as you know, and was part of that journey. And people are still shocked that there's so many traces of this colonial heritage that also connects with the indigenous, the First Nation people. So there's a lot of these relationships between the First Nation, African, indigenous, Dutch, European, etc. So try to bring that all to life.
Beautiful. John, do tell. Now you indeed a former banker, also doing your time there in Brazil too, discovering the indigenous folk there. Tell us.
Yes, as a matter of fact, to the history aspect of it, and then I'll talk a little bit about my journey. The New York, you would facetiously asked about slavery in New York. Well, the New York slave market was in fact right on Wall Street, the corner of Wall and Water. So, and I have a theory, about why Wall Street developed into sort of the center of markets in this city. There was a cattle market there. There was the slave market. Then the stock market developed, the coffee market and all that. But I think it all began with the market for slaves, and then everything else just kind of derived from that in terms of that location just outside the wall, right, as it originally was, for a convenient location for markets, right? So that's just my little theory. But anyway, so that's what the slave market was down the street. But my journey to finance, really, rather I'm a reform banker. I keep forgetting, this thing. I get this tick. The tourism has to do with the fact that I never was really a finance guy, quite frankly. I spent my entire career in finance. And if anybody from finance world sees this, they might be surprised, but I never was a finance guy. Full confessions right now, right? I was a history major, went to grad school for international affairs. I had no business doing finance, but I got recruited by a bank and figured, okay, well, this is a way to make some money. And then presto, one day I woke up and realized that I wasn't particularly happy with it, and basically was living on fumes. And let's just say that working on fumes doesn't work after a while, and it caught up to me, right? So that's why I stopped being an investment banker. Okay, and so left that profession, and saw an ad in the paper from a company called New York 201. Right, which I think I mentioned it before. One of the bigger companies here in New York City, and they do a Wall Street tour. There's a former banker who runs that, who was heavily involved in the financial crash. He worked at Deutsche Bank. He traded mortgage-backed securities. So he started his company basically to rant about what happened, right, and tell the true story about what happened on Wall Street. I showed up. He saw my background. I answered the ad, figuring, this could be interesting. And so we got to talking, and he told me what he was all about and what he was doing with his company. And I thought, that sounds interesting. Well, I have a background here. I can learn a bit more about the mortgage-backed security industry. And I did. But what I discovered most importantly, right, and then segued into doing other tours, obviously, was a platform to rant. Okay. And I love to rant and rant about stuff that's interesting. And, it's important to me, particularly, as Jennifer knows full well, as everybody on this broadcast knows full well, the importance of the Black experience in anything happened in this country. And being able to draw that out of all the tours that I've subsequently become involved in has made it a tremendously interesting project for me. But that's how I got involved.
Gotcha. And certainly, Neal, now I know part of the journey, because remember, you're a former b-ball guy like me. So you out there, you are like a nomad traveling to various courts around the city and whatnot, and then suddenly lightning strikes and you are a tour guide. And not only just a unique one, but one with a storefront right there in Harlem. So do tell the journey, man.
Yeah, it was very interesting, Curtis, because back in maybe 20 years ago, like my friend from out of the country, I was a banker working for Citibank.
Wow.
And so one day while I'm standing on the corner of 116th Street, Southwest corner there on Malcolm X Boulevard, this is a time when Citibank is merging with Travelers Insurance. And the industry is in uproar. And everybody's trying to find something to do besides banking. And so I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And so standing there, Curtis, imagine, like you said, b-ball player. I'm standing in the corner. I got my hat to the back, something like this. I got these thick sneakers on. And I'm standing in front of Nash Shit Malcolm Shabazz. And about 5 tourists start walking toward me and then looking at the mosque with these eyes of like wonderment. And I knew this was the mosque, big fan of Malcolm X. And so as they approached me, 6 more of their friends joined in. And I stopped them, dressed the way that I was dressed. And I said, guys, listen, this building right here is where Malcolm X once ministered. But when I said that, they went bananas. At the same time, in which I'm telling them the story, my friends are coming from the low-income housing project across the street. They see me talking to these people. They tell the people, listen, you might want to leave now because this guy talks a lot. My friends didn't realize is that they're looking for somebody from the community who does talk a lot about local history. And so my friends are like, Neal, come on, man, you talk too much. And as you can hear, it was very atmospheric at the time. And so now...
Neal, we just lost you. We can't hear you. Neal, we're gonna come back.
Look, can you hear me? Can you hear me, guys?
Now we can. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Go ahead. So now if you could imagine, what happens is, as they're pulling me away, the people are trying to pull me to them. And the guys go into a group and they say, wait a minute. And so as they go into the group, they start to huddle up. They know that we're going to eat. They come back out of the group. And because they know that we're going to eat, they actually come eat with us. So then I pull my friends into a group. And then they say, listen, when they come to eat with us, tell them that we're going to Sylvia's. And so one thing to another, they want to go to Sylvia's anyway. We walk from 116th Street up to 125th Street. I'm pointing out the sites and so forth to someone as I know them then. And then we're eating barbecue ribs, macaroni and cheese, collard greens. Everybody's having a good time. And then it's time for us to leave. And when it's time for us to leave the restaurant, leave them behind, I tell my friends, we just don't eat and run. We have to leave in a gracious way. My friends say, forget it. They don't know anything about eating and running. When I go to leave and walk away, the people say, let us pay you for the tour.
Wow.
They give me a $10 bill apiece. At that point in time, my friends become like meet and greeters. They're like, Neal, you don't eat. eating, running. Now everybody's talking to the folk and so forth and so on, and we collect $120. I didn't have the best basketball game that day, Curtis, on the court, because I'm thinking, how do I duplicate this? And so from there, I started this operation, Harlem Heritage Tours, and back then there were not very many walking tours in Harlem. Curtis, can you imagine what it was like, me back then, 20 years ago, walking around with 30 people who are obviously not from Harlem, walking through these areas that are not as developed as they are now? Of course,
Wow.
it's flat. Sometimes maybe the mentally ill came my way. Sometimes maybe people in the Harlem community said, what are you doing gentrifying the community? I would have to go back to those people who were naysaying, explain to them what I was doing. I would say, you see that bus there rolling down the street with 30 people? None of them came us to learn our history.
Yes.
Then over time, I was able to carve out these routes. And now I look at Harlem in terms of tourism going on. I applaud everybody that's doing it, but I don't think many people know what it took to make this thing happen some 20 years ago when Harlem was not the Harlem that it is today.
Right.
So the mission
Right.
has always been to use the industry of tourism as a way to preserve Harlem's history and also contribute to the development of the local economy. That's been a mission from the very beginning. But I think those 10, 11 guests who came 30 years ago from Turkey who gave me a start.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And you know, one of the things I think I
And some
may
been
have
doing it ever
quoted some
since.
I think I may have quoted some figures early on in this that according to, I believe it's NYC and Company, that the tourism industry is about a $55 billion business.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, and Carol, I want you to jump on this. Would you say that tours conducted by Black tour guides are getting their fair share, or does more need to be done? Do tell.
We are no way getting our fair share in regards to the amount of people that come here. It's really unfortunate. I mean, NYC and Company has done a really good job to bring us into the fold. But a lot of people still, when they come here, it's about Times Square, you know, it's about downtown Manhattan. And we can thank like the Airbnbs for coming along, because they were the ones that really dragged people into our community, and to have them have a different perspective as to what they can see when they come to New York City and stuff like that. But we are no way scratching the surface of that money that's coming in and stuff, because like I said, people still have a very negative image about Harlem, or they don't know what's here. Feel like there's nothing really to see. They just think it's the Apollo Theater. And I'm telling them, we're much bigger than that. And if all they think about is 125th Street, they are missing the beauty, the charm of this community and the vibrancy that it contains and still holds today, even with all the things that are going on.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd even go one step further and say that, travelers, international travelers, tend to see New York as just Manhattan.
Yeah.
And don't realize that New York is a state, and which is why we try to emphasize also moving not just Midtown, but to Harlem, up Inwood, all the way up to into the Hudson River Valley. And people are shocked, but there's so much more to New York than just Midtown Manhattan.
Yeah, and like I said, Airbnbs were great for us, because that people stayed here and then they walked around the neighborhood, they got acclimated, and they saw the things that were here that we were doing for free, which they're amazed at how much free things there are to do here in the city with all the parks that we have here in our community, and closing off the street and having a block party or jazzmobile or somebody performing. It's like mind-boggling to them. And I was like, but this is how we live.
Yeah,
absolutely. John?
I would like to say, just in addition to all that, getting back to something that I kind of glancingly talked about or mentioned earlier, and that is, coming to Harlem and all that. It's an important part of the experience, and people do not know what's going on, and that needs to be a bigger part of folks understanding, getting out of Midtown Manhattan and Times Square and all the typical tourist routes or routes and all that. But also people do not understand the part of the entire New York story that is really undertold. The Black side of the history, the indigenous people side of the history, all that. And that's another way that people of color, particularly Black people, are not getting our fair share of what goes on here. Somebody has to be telling those stories. And I'll tell you, I mean, that's what motivated me to do this when I realized that I could rant about this stuff. But I mean, the stories that people don't know that are incredibly important about things that they see every day, that they've been to every day of their life, the stories that they don't know are just amazing given how important they are.
Or better yet, how Harlem played a significant, or was the main focal point for bringing jazz to Europe. With the 369 Regiment going over there. And I mean, if it wasn't for that, Europe would not be what it is today in regards to loving our culture, the understanding of jazz music, all the African Americans that, you know, stayed over there and dropped babies over there and stuff like that. We opened up the door because people just think we popped up in 1919, 1920. And I have to tell them, we've been here since 1658.
That's right.
You know, if it wasn't for, you know, that war and our guys going over there and fighting for this country and just and expanding and showing them, guess what? There's a whole world over here that y'all don't know about. And they just fell in love with these guys, you know, for their bravery, for fighting, but also taking jazz music over there and our culture and stuff. And it was like, whoa, what's going on? Be like, yeah, there's this place called Harlem.
Exactly.
And that just really kicked open the door to the world as to who we were as a community and as a people and stuff.
Right. And that's part of the untold story. Well, the fact that half the jazz musicians that we all know about actually lived in Queens.
Yes. And that's another place they came from. Yeah.
Right. That's which is, you know, they played in Manhattan. But to Jennifer's point about understanding that important history didn't just take place in Midtown Manhattan.
And I would actually say that Amsterdam pre the pandemic was one of the centers of European jazz scene. There's still a cotton club in Amsterdam that has jazz, again, pre-pandemic, every week for free. So there's a huge movement of musicians that came. Most people think about Paris or London, but don't realize that there's this deep connection also to the Netherlands as well.
Yeah, it's really nice to see the connection. It doesn't matter where you are. Jazz, like music in general, it crosses all lines, you know, which is really nice and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why we started Harlem Jazz Box with Craig, because I told him, I said, if we don't do this, you're going to kill yourself. If somebody else come and does it, you know what I'm saying? This be in your home, you know, and it's done very well, but we took a major hit because we couldn't put on our annual gospel concert, which funds jazz for us. We were able to finally get it up last year, October, as an experiment, you know, putting on the mask, temperature checks, this and that. And we did a production out of that we're going to show in September. And we're going to do some other stuff around it because we want to start live streaming, you know, because we don't know if people are going to be able to come back into the space. You know, the way they were before. So we're going to start live streaming the jazz. And Craig has really been out there hustling like crazy because we don't get any funding from anybody. It's what we collect at the door, you know. So it's been a struggle, but we decided to bite the bullet and say, you know, we need this just for our own sanity.
Right,
and
absolutely.
People have been very appreciative. They've been coming out, be like, yeah, we need something to get out the house. So the jazz has really been a nice focal point that we've really been focusing on because tourism, like I said, as far as that walking piece, it's going to be a while. So we just been really focusing on the jazz piece for now.
Very true. NightWatchman, you about to say something?
Oh yeah, so Carolyn had mentioned the impact of the Airbnbs, and it reminded me, and I think Curtis, you know a little bit more about this, about the study that showed the lack of hotel room space in Harlem, and that impact on tourism. So we know that there is a hotel that is slated to open up on 125th Street. Curtis, what's the ETA on that? And is that something that you think will help the Harlem tourism business?
I definitely think it will help the Harlem tourism business because, as you know, the study that was actually done was showing that we were under hoteled in terms of rooms by about 1,500. So absolutely, with the development of the Victoria Theater, redevelopment of that, which is slated for early next year, fingers crossed that it will act. Thank you, thank you. It will definitely go yards to address that need, no doubt. And I have to say that remember the number 3 destination, for all international tourism is Harlem.
That's
right here, baby. Yes.
I would like to add to that because there is 2 things. One, there is Harlem, the Netherlands, Harlem, and Curtis, we tried to participate in this, and you asked a question earlier about percentage in terms of market share.
Yeah.
There is a Harlem to Harlem network or collaboration that was more of a the municipalities and the cities themselves were trying to create this connections, but we were not included in that. When I say we, organizations of color, it is a challenge not just in New York State, it is a global problem. There are tours like ours. There's my colleague and co-writer of the books that I've written. She has a Harlem, Netherlands, a walking tour that also links Harlem, New York. There are cities throughout the Netherlands, which is why we had written the book about the whole country, because there are so many links to the US, not only to, of course, New York, but to other cities. And there's a huge gap. But I would like to give credit to the movement of the Black travel organizations like No Madness Travel Tribe, Black and Abroad. They have also been very, very influential in bringing new visitors to experience the Black experience, as you put it, so that we're getting a larger share of the Black international travelers, especially that age group that has more disposable income, the boomers who are retiring and traveling. So because of our own ingenuity and initiatives, there is, I think, more interest within the Black community, and that's what the audience that we are really, I think, for me, very interested in capturing, because we don't know our own stories.
That's it.
We also need to understand how we have influenced the world. So I'm so proud to be a part of this community, because I think this is so necessary, and that we get the word out, that we look beyond the pandemic, because this is not going to last forever, and that we have to rebuild and pivot. We've had to do virtual tours as well, because we haven't been able to move as freely. We do them now on boats, for example, instead of walking tours. So everybody's had to readapt themselves and to pivot and to change the way that they do things in order to keep moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, speaking about jazz, so we certainly do know that the jazz artists, when coming to, let's say, do a gig in New York City, right, couldn't stay at the hotels downtown. We know this. So instead, I know ended up, Carolyn, we know this, Teresa Hotel in Harlem. All right, that's one of the spots, and of course we know that during the let's say the birth of bebop, of course, performing there at the what's that, at Minton's Playhouse, exactly. So John, you touched on it a little bit. Explain in terms of Southeast Queens why that particular community is so significant to jazz or entertainers of the day.
Yeah, well, back when in the big band era, right, the early 40s, late 30s, early 40s, when jazz was becoming the most popular musical form in the United States, you had all the clubs, right, in New York City, and New York City is still the jazz capital of the world, I guess, at this point, and it certainly was back then. Traveling into town, there were places to stay. You stayed with friends, you stayed at the Teresa, all that kind of stuff. But what about the folks who lived here, right?
Yes.
Where did they stay? Well, they stayed in Harlem. Okay. I don't know of anybody who was in Bed-Stuy at that point, but certainly mostly in Harlem. Well, there were a lot of folks who were making a lot of money back then, right? I mean, these people had radio shows that were broadcast nationwide, all right? Yeah. So they're making big money. And some of them did not want to live in smallish apartments or even biggish apartments in Harlem or anywhere else. They wanted to live in a house. They wanted the suburban dream, right? They wanted a lawn. They wanted to put their car in their own driveway, et cetera, et cetera. And that was not possible. Back then, it was simply not possible. Except changes started to happen. Where? In Southeast Queens. All right. South Queens was at that point sort of an urban. It had been developed as a suburban community in an urban environment, in the environment of New York City, right? But it was definitely a suburban place. Lawns, broad boulevards, the whole 9 yards. I mean, classic suburban looking stuff. And as it turns out, there were a couple of people there for, just by hook and by crook in this place called Addersley Park in Southeast Queens, part of St. Albans, right? And they were a little independent minded and decided, you know what? I mean, we own these houses. There may be restrictive covenants that we signed or whatever, but if we want to leave, we're going to leave and we're going to sell our house to whoever we feel like selling it to, right? And one of the people who bought a house there was Fats Waller.
Okay, yes.
and so he bought a house there, and then that got other jazz folks who lived in the city to take a look, right? Yeah, at this particular neighborhood. One of them was Count Basie. Okay.
Nice.
And so when Count moved down there, right, all of a sudden people started to look up. At the same time, there were some legal challenges going on to restrictive covenants and all that, that eventually ended up meaning that restricted covenants got eliminated. I mean, I think there was a case out in St. Louis that was really the determining legal case where restricted covenants were actually made illegal. But in any case, Count and Fats Waller down there, all of a sudden, folks who lived in other parts of New York City. Is that me?
Someone. But go ahead.
Somebody's phone.
We got you.
Okay. Started looking.
Hello?
No, that's not me.
Carolyn, put yourself on mute. That's not you. Jennifer, put yourself on mute.
It's actually me. I'm trying to see if I can bring in Jackie Orange on the phone.
This is me. Hey, Bob. I don't know what's going on.
So, Bob.
Can I hear what? I can hear you.
Oh, that's Jackie Orange.
That is Jackie Orange. So, Bob, try to mute her for a second. I'm continue with John. Go ahead, John.
Okay. We good?
Yes, we good.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway, so, started to move down there, right? And it wasn't just jazz folks. I mean, you had Count Basie, you had Milt Hinton, you had Illinois Jacquette, you had John Coltrane, you had Lester Young, you had, Lena Horne.
And this is all Southeast Queens.
This is all Southeast Queens.
Beautiful.
Right.
And we do know that one of the early innovators of jazz, of course, was not Southeast Queens, but Corona. So
yeah. Well, this was Southeast Queens. These are the folks who wanted the suburban lifestyle, right? They wanted to buy a nice car and park it in a nice driveway on a nice broad boulevard that was absolutely tree lined, right? Okay.
Nice.
So you had that contingent, and they were all down there, right? And of course, it didn't just appeal to jazz folks; it appealed to all kinds of black celebrities. So the point is, Jackie Robinson, that's where he lived. Okay, and Lena Horne, and all these kind of folks. So this was the vibe down there. There was another set of people who were less concerned about all that kind of stuff, but didn't necessarily want to live in a small apartment in Harlem, right? And so they kind of gravitated to another neighborhood that had actually always been traditionally less restrictive and all that. And that happened to be Corona, and it started out with Louis Armstrong.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the Louis Armstrong House Museum and all that. He moved there because, frankly, he grew up poor, and he said, I feel good here. I've done better. This is a nice working class neighborhood. There've always been a few black people here, right? And there's all kinds of immigrants. So this is where I feel comfortable. Now, I don't need to go out to Southeast, the suburban lifestyle, right? I'm real happy right here. And he could have moved anywhere. Louis Armstrong.
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, he could have moved anywhere he wanted to move, but he didn't. He stayed there until he died. In God, when was it? The 80s, I think it was, mid 80s or maybe the late 70s. But in any case, by that point, this man was making all the money in the world. And then other people, sort of like mind, moved there. Dizzy Gillespie lived right around the corner from Louis Armstrong.
Nice.
Nat Adderley and his brother, the Adderley brothers.
The Adderley brothers,
lived there, right? Jimmy Heath lived there. Jimmy Rushing lived there. Wow. Malcolm X lived there too, by the way. Lived in Corona. There was that whole contingent and Willie Mays and a bunch of other folks who didn't feel like going out to Southeast Queens and doing all that. That can be kind of oppressive too, as we well know. And those were the folks who populated Corona. But yeah, those were the two neighborhoods, Corona and Addersley Park, that were the hub of black sort of artistic and to some degrees intellectual activity for that period. Of course, everybody at a certain point when desegregation occurred in sort of a massive way, then all those folks left. I mean, Ella Fitzgerald was out in Southeast Queens as well. She moved out to L.A.
Yeah.
You know, James Brown had moved into the house.
Exactly.
I mean, all these people, they all left eventually, but it's still a beautiful neighborhood. You know, and there it is. But that's the history.
That's good.
Good stuff. Oh, Curtis, you're back on mute again.
Kurt, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
50
Yes.
cent now. 50 cent in the jar. 50 cent.
Now for what? Now I can't hear you guys. What's going on here? NightWatchman, begin talking. Because Lord knows what's going on.
It's
here.
one of those mornings. But
we hear you, Curtis.
Yeah, we were trying to bring on Jackie Orange, and we had some problems getting her on, but we did want to hear her story. I think she can hear us, but we can't hear her. So, you know, the technical, we were supposed to sacrifice a calf to the god of technology this morning, and we did not. So,
can I just say one thing?
Absolutely.
One other thing, and that is, this is an important part of the sort of Queens jazz experience. You know, you had all those folks living out there, right? And so what that meant was that they were in each other's houses all the time, right? I mean, you had bebop people, you had traditional people, people who did standards like Ella Fitzgerald, you had big band folks like Count Basie, but they were in each other's houses all the time. So the creative energy, right, that got unleashed, which showed up in what these people eventually did, right, in terms of the songs that they produced and the music they produced, was extraordinary. There's never been anything like it. It's really stunning to have all these people who were so influential in that field living within easy car rides or walking distance of each other, sort of marshaling and sharing all that creative energy. Just wanted to put that out there. And I also wanted to say something else. Some of the other jazz people who lived in Queens were not Black. Glenn Miller, all right, if you want to consider him jazz. Okay? But Artie Shaw, Red Norvo, and Benny Goodman, all right, also spent time in Queens. And I would dare say that some of what they ended up doing was influenced by the interactions that they had, were many, with all the Black jazz musicians in Queens.
Absolutely. Good point, John, for sure. So I need to actually, and NightWatchman, were you able to get Jackie?
We tried.
Now I can't hear you.
With us. She's with us in spirit, and she can hear us, but we
anybody hear NightWatchman, or you can?
Yeah. We hear you, Nightwatch. We hear everybody.
Well, I can honestly say about Jackie, she does a really good food tour. We're like soldiers in arms. We always support each other and stuff like that. And right now, me and her are collaborating on a project together. Cross your fingers, it should be out for the holiday season. And it's always been a pleasure working with her because she always brings that positive energy to, like, you know, us getting together and bouncing ideas off of each other and stuff like that. So sorry that she couldn't get into the interview, but she's been a really good support system for me and me supporting her in our endeavors and stuff like that. And like I said, we're working on something together that it should be very interesting for the community of Harlem as a whole and stuff like that.
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that is that I think what's, Curtis, you asked us in the very beginning in terms of the market share. There are others who, like Black Gotham in Lower Manhattan, African Journeys, a friend of mine, Richard Honeywell, who does tours in the state as well. There is such a rich history on how we all got started and are doing what we do. And we've tried at various times to collaborate with each other. It may or may not have worked out that way. But what I would really like to see in the future, of course, I Love New York has been extremely supportive of our efforts, is some way of galvanizing this coalition of talent you know, I never feel like I'm competing with anyone else.
Oh,
No one else
Right.
feels that way.
Right.
We all bring something unique and special and different that we don't have to try to, you know, compete. That whole notion that there's so few Black businesses that we're all is a myth.
Right.
We all support each other. We all want each other to succeed. There has to be a way, given the network and the resources that are available in New York State and around the world, that we can create some sort of, you know, I don't know if it's what to call it, where we can leverage each other's gifts and talents. Because whenever I'm doing a tour in New York State, I have to reach out, and always do try to reach out to my colleagues there to say, hey, we're going to be in Harlem. So what can we do? We're going to be in Lower Manhattan. Let's do a Lower Manhattan. I don't need to own the whole thing.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
Pie is big
All
enough.
of us to share
Nice.
and benefit from this. So that, I hope, comes out of this conversation is how can we work closer together, get the support, because it's about economics. Let's get down to the bottom line. It takes money to build these infrastructures and to have the kind of resources to be able to function. That's,
I mean, the only thing I can think of, like, as us as a collective as a whole, that we can have a page on our websites where we all represent each other, or either have a pamphlet or some type of PDF document that we can share amongst ourselves to say, you know, we're here, we're willing to work with each other and stuff like that, because if something's going on, you know, it's just like, hey, guess what? Look at all these companies that are here that can help expand your experience wherever you might be in regards to African American culture and stuff like that.
Nice.
And I need the title of your books because I really want to read them, because I'm always reading and stuff like that. And but I want to get all three of those because I'm always reading. So reading is a beautiful thing. It always gives you pieces of information that you use, you know.
You need to be doing that.
And it's like even current news that pops up, you know, you get little fun facts and things. Oh, I didn't know that. And I got millions of notes all posted around and stuff. But out of doing my walking tours with students, I realized that even though they were claiming that they were learning the Harlem Renaissance or something like that in school, that when we did the tours, they didn't know half to 75% of the stuff that I was talking about.
right. And that's true everywhere.
Yeah. So I had put together like little reading comprehension lessons. So if we was doing the Harlem Renaissance, I might have did a lesson on Arturo Schonberg that had 10 little questions, and I would give it to the teacher. I was like, have them do this little lesson before we do the tour. So this way the tour is more engaging between me and the students. They was like, oh, they love the lessons. I was like, that lesson? So the teacher was like, yeah, they really enjoyed the lesson. I was like, okay, so I'm on to something here. So out of that, I had created Harlem Roots, which is educational purport to welcome to Harlem, where it's just reading comprehension lessons about people, places, and events pertaining to Harlem. So I was doing on that website, and it was more of a paper portal, but since the pandemic, I'm making it online now.
Yeah.
Nice.
So now anybody can be anywhere in the world, pull down these lessons about Harlem, people, places, and events and stuff like that. So that's what the pandemic has given me the opportunity to do, to work on that, not having to run to work. I'd work all day and then be too tired. So not being so beat down tired after work, I would put the lessons up. So that's one of the things that I've been working on to hopefully supplement the tourism part that will not be coming back as quickly. So anybody anywhere in the world can pull down a lesson about Harlem and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And just expand their knowledge about the community and stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful. You know what, Night Watchman, I know we're getting ready to close it out. So I definitely want to ask one parting question, because eventually the world will open up again fully. We know this. So I want to know. So I am a prospective tourist coming to New York, coming to Harlem, and I want to know why I should actually look you guys up. Carolyn, give us some parting words on that note, but also how one can also get in touch with you.
So the best way to get in touch with us at Welcome to Harlem would be to go to our website, welcometoharlem.com, and you can talk to us on our online help and connect with us and stuff like that. But one of the reasons why you want to view somebody local is because we walk the streets. We know all little nitty gritty and stuff like that as to what's going on in the community. Our tours never just go straight down the block. We might veer to the right or left, depending on what's going on in the community. You might find yourself standing in the middle of going inside of a church that might have been closed to everybody else. You might find yourself in a brownstone, and people are just amazed on the size and how beautiful they are because they're so used to taking pictures from the outside. So you might find yourself coming to the inside of one of these beautiful buildings and stuff like that. But the main thing is you want somebody local that is connected to the community that can show you, like I said, all the little details that you're not going to learn on these other tours. They're just going to walk you down the block and point to a building and keep it moving and stuff. So that's why you want somebody local when you tour here inside of Harlem.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I'm over in Europe, but I'm planning to come to New York. Jennifer, why you?
Well, I think one is being a native New Yorker, and so I have a true love for New York, obviously from it being where I was born and have a lot of roots there. But what we really try to do is to make the hidden history visible again. So we have a lot of travelers who may come to Amsterdam or start in New York and then travel to Amsterdam. We want to emphasize that there's a whole state to love, not just one Manhattan or Midtown. And after you've done a Harlem tour, for example, you could board our bus and then take a journey upstate through the Hudson River Valley and explore this hidden history of the African, Native American, and Dutch heritage that most people don't know about. So I think it's about creating a journey for people that lasts for a lifetime, that people that are either from New York don't know a lot about the whole state and its history, or people who are from Europe or anywhere in the world. If you're just interested in not just a tour, but a pilgrimage, because that's what it is, it becomes a very spiritual experience when you start to uncover all of this hidden heritage. So I'm excited about the future. I'm really excited about collaborating with all of my colleagues here. Thanks to you, Curtis, and to course to Markley from I Love New York and all the partners. It's about building relationships. And I think that's what makes all of our tours so special, is that we want to create a relationship with our guests and give them an experience that they'll last a lifetime.
And Jennifer, how do they get in touch with you?
The best way, of course, is our website, blackheritagetours.com. Unfortunately, right now, given the pandemic restrictions, we're not in New York, but you have obviously some amazing guides that are still able to do some things in New York. We are doing virtual tours, so you can learn about our virtual tours and about the tours that we do in other places around the world.
Excellent, excellent. John, do tell. Queens?
Queens.
I thought I would stay right in Manhattan, but do tell. Why Queens?
No, you can't stay just right in Manhattan. All right? You don't know New York until you know Queens.
All right.
I mean, that's a bold statement, but think about it, right? I mean, from a historical perspective, there's a tremendous amount of important stuff that happened in Queens. The oldest continually operating house of worship in the city is in Queens, all right? And that particular house of worship had everything to do with the amendment in our Constitution covering freedom of religion. The history of that amendment began, and the Bill of Rights began at that house of worship in Queens. So that's just some of the history. You have the only urban nature preserve in the country here in Queens. You got the largest tennis facility, one of the most lucrative sporting events in the world in Queens. The original home of the UN was in Queens. There are all kinds of incredibly unique things about Queens. And of course, Steinway pianos. You've seen a Steinway piano?
Yep.
They're still produced in Queens. They're only produced in 2 places in the world, and one of them is in Queens, right? And they do shows there. You can go on tours there, all that kind of stuff. But the other thing is, forget the hate part of it. But from a modern perspective, Queens is the most ethnically and linguistically diverse place on the planet. All right. So if this country is built on immigration, voluntary or otherwise, right? Then understanding a place like Queens and experiencing the communities out here is part of your American and New York experience, right? And so those are some important reasons why you don't know New York and you don't know this country until you know Queens. And that's why you need to come out here. And I can go on and on about some of the historical stuff, but I won't do that. New York City, you didn't know this, has the largest beach in any city in the country. Rockaway.
Ah,
It's 11 miles long, and at
That's
one point, the largest hotel in the world stood on that beach. All right,
that's
and
right.
there's stories about Rockaway that affect Black people that are astounding, right? And I can't get into that right now, but that's a teaser for you when you think about what you're going to do when you come to New York. So there's my pitch to tourists.
So,
So
Jonathan,
how does
where
one
do
get in
people
touch
reach
with you, John?
Queens360tours.com. I've got some YouTube videos as well on there, or you can get to the YouTube channel via that. And it's interesting, Carolyn, what you were saying about lessons for school kids, because I actually was kind of working through the same concept. One of the things I do when I'm not doing tours, right, which is most of the time now, is teach. Okay, and what the people at the school, I had a long-term gig in this one particular high school in Queens, and they said, well, listen, you're a tour guide and you specialize in Queens. These kids, a lot of them are immigrants and they know nothing about Queens, right? So I made some videos sort of aimed at them, right? Same kind of concept, and working through how to pivot effectively and how to get paid for some of the documentary work, that I find myself involved with these videos.
The other thing
Beautiful.
I would encourage people to do, Curtis, is to join social media. We have a very active social media platform. So Black Heritage Tours on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn.
Right.
So I think we should definitely be galvanizing that energy from the social media platforms. And I'm sure everybody
has. Same thing with Welcome to Harlem. We're on all the platforms. So yeah, we're always constantly sending information out that's informative, and also just fun facts about the neighborhood that people don't realize about the people, places, and events that have made Harlem what it is.
Exactly. So
NightWatchman, we got to wrap this up.
Take us home.
We also want to shout out Jackie Orange, who we weren't able to get her on, but you can check out her website, tasteharlem.com. We will try to have you on at another point in time, Jackie, but we love what you've been doing in the community, and we appreciate all of you for sharing your time, experiences, and insights with the visitors and people here alike. So you've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM. Also, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook. Thanks for watching and listening.